watched my 8-year-old grandson Tommy press record on his tablet, hidden behind the living room curtain, as his mother screamed at me through the front door, "You're not welcome here anymore, Margaret. Stay away from my family." The door slammed so hard it rattled the windows, and I stood there on the porch holding the birthday cake I'd spent all morning baking for Tommy, wondering how everything had gone so terribly wrong. What I didn't know was that Tommy had been recording everything for weeks, and what he captured would change our family forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Margaret Chen, and at 68 years old, I never imagined I'd be fighting for the right to see my own grandson. For 5 years, Tommy had been the brightest light in my world, ever since my son David brought him and his new wife Jessica into our lives. Back then, Jessica seemed like a godsend. She was attentive, caring, and most importantly, she made David happy in ways I hadn't seen since his divorce from Tommy's biological mother. The transition hadn't been easy for any of us. Tommy was only 3 when his birth mother, Rebecca, decided motherhood wasn't for her and moved to California to pursue her acting dreams. David was devastated, working double shifts at the engineering firm while trying to raise a toddler alone. I stepped in to help, watching Tommy during the day, reading him bedtime stories, teaching him to ride his bicycle in my backyard. We developed a bond that felt unbreakable. When David met Jessica at a conference in Denver 2 years later, I was cautiously optimistic. She was a marketing executive, polished and professional, with an MBA from Northwestern and a corner office downtown. During their courtship, she was nothing but gracious to me. She complimented my cooking, asked for family recipes, and even suggested we start a tradition of Sunday dinners together. When they got engaged after 8 months of dating, I was genuinely happy for them. The wedding was beautiful, held at the Riverside Gardens, with Tommy as the ring bearer, beaming in his tiny tuxedo. Jessica looked radiant in her designer gown, and when she knelt down to Tommy's level during the ceremony to promise she'd be the best stepmother she could be, there wasn't a dry eye in the place. I remember thinking how lucky we all were to have found each other. The first year of their marriage was like a honeymoon period for our entire family. Jessica threw elaborate birthday parties for Tommy, complete with themed decorations and professional photographers. She enrolled him in soccer and piano lessons, bought him educational toys, and seemed genuinely invested in his development. Sunday dinners at my house became the highlight of everyone's week, with Jessica bringing wine and flowers, complimenting everything I made, and encouraging Tommy to tell me about his week at school. But looking back now, I can see the subtle changes that began in year 2. It started with small comments that seemed innocent enough at the time. "Margaret, you really don't need to buy Tommy so many toys. We're trying to teach him that happiness doesn't come from material things." Or, "I noticed Tommy's been eating a lot of sugar when he's with you. We're really trying to establish healthy eating habits at home." I tried to be accommodating. I stopped bringing presents every time I visited, switched to fruit snacks instead of cookies, and made sure to ask Jessica before planning any activities with Tommy. I told myself she was just being a good mother, establishing boundaries and routines. After all, she was the one dealing with Tommy's day-to-day care while David worked long hours on a major project for the city. The criticism became more frequent during year 3. Jessica began questioning my parenting methods, suggesting that my way of doing things was outdated. "Margaret, I know you raised David differently, but child psychology has come so far since then. We really need to be more conscious about Tommy's emotional development." She started sending me articles about modern parenting techniques, books about child psychology, and links to parenting blogs that contradicted everything I thought I knew about raising children. When I tried to discuss these concerns with David, he was caught in the middle. "Mom, Jessica just wants what's best for Tommy. She's been reading a lot about child development, and some of her points make sense. Maybe we could all try to be on the same page." I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the stress of trying to balance his demanding job, his new marriage, and his mother's feelings. So I backed down again. The turning point came during Tommy's 7th birthday party. I had offered to help with the preparations, as I'd done every year since Jessica joined our family. But this time, she declined. "Thanks, Margaret, but I've got everything under control. Why don't you just come as a guest and enjoy yourself?" The party was held at their house, a modern 2-story in the suburbs that Jessica had decorated like something out of a magazine. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. Professional decorations, catered food, a dozen of Tommy's classmates running around the perfectly manicured backyard. But something felt off. Tommy seemed subdued, going through the motions of opening presents and cutting cake without his usual enthusiasm. When he opened the gift I'd brought him, a wooden train set that had been David's favorite toy as a child, Jessica's smile became strained. "Oh, how lovely, Margaret. Though I'm not sure where we'll put it. We're really trying to minimize clutter in the house." She set the box aside without showing it to the other children, and I watched Tommy's face fall. Later, when I was helping clean up, I found the train set in a closet, still unopened. That night, I called David. "Is everything all right with Tommy? He seemed different today." There was a long pause before he answered. "Jessica thinks he might be having some adjustment issues. She's been reading about how inconsistent parenting styles can confuse children. She thinks maybe we should establish clearer boundaries about visits and activities." The boundaries started small. Instead of spontaneous visits, I needed to call ahead. Instead of taking Tommy out for ice cream, or to the park whenever I wanted, activities needed to be pre-approved. Sunday dinners became every other Sunday, then once a month, then when schedules permit. Each restriction was presented as being in Tommy's best interest, backed by articles Jessica had found online or advice from the parenting books she constantly quoted. I tried to adapt, but it felt like I was walking on eggshells every time I interacted with my grandson. Jessica would hover during our visits, correcting things I said, redirecting activities she didn't approve of, and making comments about how overwhelming too much attention could be for a child. Tommy began to seem nervous around me, constantly looking to Jessica for approval before responding to my questions or accepting treats I brought. The situation deteriorated rapidly during the spring of Tommy's 8th year. I had planned to take him to the Children's Museum for their dinosaur exhibit, something he'd been excited about for weeks. When I arrived to pick him up, Jessica met me at the door with a tight smile. "I'm sorry, Margaret, but we've decided Tommy needs to spend the weekend catching up on his homework and getting ready for the school week. Maybe another time." Through the window, I could see Tommy in his jacket and shoes, ready to go, his face pressed against the glass with confusion and disappointment written all over it. My heart broke seeing him like that, dressed up for an outing that was being canceled at the last minute for no real reason. "Jessica, he's been looking forward to this all week. His homework can wait a few hours. I'm his mother, Margaret. I decide what's best for him." The way she said mother felt like a slap. "And I've decided that he needs structure and routine, not constant disruptions and—"
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
Overstimulation. That's when I made my first real mistake. "You're not his mother, Jessica. You're his stepmother. And you're keeping him from his grandmother for no good reason." The words came out harsher than I intended, fueled by months of accumulated frustration and the sight of Tommy's disappointed face. Jessica's expression turned ice cold. I am the only mother Tommy has ever really known. And if you can't respect the boundaries we've set for our family, maybe you need to reconsider your role in his life. She closed the door, leaving me standing on the porch while Tommy watched from the window, tears streaming down his face. I called David immediately, but he was traveling for work. When he finally called me back 3 days later, his voice was strained. "Mom, Jessica told me what happened. You can't undermine her authority like that. She's trying to create stability for Tommy, and comments like that make everything harder. David, she's isolating Tommy from his family. She's controlling every aspect of his life, and she's using him to punish me for not falling in line." I was crying now, something I rarely did. But the injustice of the situation was overwhelming. "Mom, I know this is hard, but Jessica has some valid points. Maybe we all need to step back and figure out how to make this work better." The conversation ended with David promising to talk to Jessica, but nothing changed. If anything, the restrictions became more severe. Summer arrived, and with it came the annual family reunion at my sister Helen's lake house in Wisconsin. It was a tradition that went back 30 years, with cousins and aunts and uncles gathering for a long weekend of swimming, barbecuing, and catching up. Tommy had attended every year since he was born, and he loved playing with his cousins and helping his great-uncle Frank with the boat. When I mentioned the reunion to David, he seemed hesitant. I'll have to check with Jessica. She's been talking about taking Tommy to her parents' house in Phoenix that weekend. This was news to me. Jessica's parents lived in Arizona, and while they were perfectly nice people, Tommy had only met them a handful of times. The idea that they would take precedence over our long-standing family tradition felt like another deliberate slight. Sure enough, Jessica vetoed the reunion. Tommy needs to spend time with my family too, Margaret. It's important that he understands he has grandparents on both sides. The irony wasn't lost on me that Jessica was advocating for grandparent relationships when she'd been systematically undermining mine for months. The Phoenix trip was documented extensively on Jessica's social media accounts. Photos of Tommy at the Grand Canyon, at resort pools, at fancy restaurants. In every picture, he looked polite but distant, going through the motions of having fun. The spontaneous joy I was used to seeing in his face was absent, replaced by the careful expression of a child who'd learned to perform happiness rather than feel it. When they returned, I tried to arrange a visit to hear about Tommy's trip. Jessica scheduled it for exactly 1 hour on a Tuesday afternoon, with the explicit instruction that I not bring any gifts or treats. When I arrived, Tommy dutifully showed me photos on Jessica's phone and recited facts about the places they'd visited, but it felt rehearsed, like he was giving a school presentation, rather than sharing an experience with his grandmother. Halfway through the visit, Tommy asked if he could show me something in his room. Jessica immediately intervened. "Tommy, Margaret doesn't need to go upstairs. You can bring whatever it is down here." But Tommy persisted, tugging on my hand with an urgency I hadn't seen from him in months. "Please, Grandma Maggie. It's really important." Jessica looked annoyed but nodded. 5 minutes, then you need to come back down for your music practice." Tommy led me upstairs to his bedroom, which had been completely redecorated since my last visit. Gone were the colorful posters and toy bins I remembered. Everything was now beige and minimalist, like a hotel room rather than a child's space. Tommy closed the door and pulled a small tablet from under his mattress. "Grandma Maggie, I've been making videos. Do you want to see them?" He showed me short clips he'd recorded of himself talking about his days, his feelings, his confusion about why I wasn't around as much anymore. The videos broke my heart. Here was my grandson processing his emotions alone, trying to make sense of the changes in his family dynamics. "I miss our adventures, Grandma Maggie. I miss baking cookies with you and hearing stories about Daddy when he was little. I don't understand why Mommy Jessica says you need space from us." The innocence in his voice, the genuine confusion and sadness made me want to cry. "Tommy, sweetie, I miss our adventures too. More than you know." I hugged him tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo, memorizing the weight of his small body against mine. Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements, but that doesn't mean I love you any less. Are you and Mommy Jessica having a disagreement? His 8-year-old directness cut straight to the heart of the matter. Before I could answer, Jessica's voice called from downstairs. "Tommy, time's up." The sharpness in her tone made Tommy flinch, and he quickly hid the tablet back under his mattress. As we walked downstairs, he whispered, "Don't tell Mommy Jessica about the videos, okay? She doesn't like it when I record things." That comment sent a chill down my spine. Why would Jessica have a problem with Tommy making innocent videos in his own room? What was she afraid he might capture? The visit ended abruptly when Jessica announced that Tommy needed to start his piano practice. I was ushered out with promises of another visit soon, though no specific date was set. Driving home, I couldn't shake the image of Tommy hiding a tablet under his mattress like it was contraband, or the fear in his voice when he asked me not to tell Jessica about the videos. I tried calling David that evening, but Jessica answered his phone. "David's in a conference call, Margaret. Is there something I can help you with?" Her tone was polite but cold, making it clear that she had no intention of actually helping with anything. "I just wanted to talk to him about Tommy. I'm concerned about how withdrawn he seems lately." There was a pause, and I could almost hear Jessica choosing her words carefully. "Tommy is fine, Margaret. He's adjusting to having more structure in his life, which is healthy for a child his age. If you have concerns about his well-being, maybe you should trust that his parents know what's best for him." The conversation ended with Jessica promising to have David call me back, but he never did. When I tried his work number the next day, his assistant said he was unavailable. When I tried his cell phone, it went straight to voicemail. It felt like I was being deliberately shut out, not just from Tommy's life but from David's as well. The final straw came 3 weeks later, on a beautiful Saturday morning in early October. I had been invited to Tommy's soccer game by David himself during a brief phone conversation earlier that week. "His team is playing for the championship, Mom. It would mean a lot to Tommy if you were there." I was thrilled. It felt like the first genuine invitation I'd received in months. I arrived at the soccer field early, bringing a small cooler with orange slices and water bottles for the team, something I'd done at every game I'd attended. I found a spot on the bleachers with a good view of the field and waited excitedly for the game to begin. Tommy spotted me from the field and waved enthusiastically, his face lighting up with genuine happiness for the first time in weeks. That's when Jessica appeared. She climbed the bleachers toward me, her expression thunderous. "What are you doing here, Margaret?" I was confused. "David invited me. Tommy's playing for the championship." I gestured toward the field where Tommy was still looking over at us, his expression now uncertain. "David made a mistake. You're not supposed to be here." Jessica's voice was loud enough that other parents were starting to stare. We agreed that family events would be coordinated through me from now on, and I did not approve this. The humiliation was overwhelming. Here I was, a grandmother who had attended every possible game and school event for 5 years, being told I wasn't welcome at my grandson's soccer championship. "Jessica, please. Can't we discuss this later? Tommy's excited that I'm here." "No, we cannot discuss this later. You need to leave. Now." Her voice carried across the bleachers, drawing more attention from other families. "You're causing a scene, and Tommy doesn't need this kind of drama in his life." I looked toward the field and saw Tommy watching our interaction, his face pale with confusion and embarrassment. The joy that had been there moments earlier was completely gone, replaced by the same careful, worried expression I'd been seeing more and more lately. Other children were starting to notice the commotion, pointing and whispering. "Fine," I said quietly, gathering my things. "I'll leave. But this isn't about Tommy's well-being, Jessica. This is about control." I climbed down from the bleachers as gracefully as I could manage, feeling the eyes of dozens of parents following my retreat. As I reached my car, I could hear the referee's whistle signaling the start of the game. I sat in the parking lot for a few minutes, too shaken to drive immediately. Through my windshield, I could see Tommy on the field, but his usual energy and enthusiasm were missing. He kept glancing toward the bleachers, looking for me, clearly distracted from the game. My heart broke knowing that my forced departure was affecting his performance during what should have been a triumphant moment. That evening, I called David's house, determined to have a real conversation about what was happening to our family. Jessica answered, as she always seemed to these days. "Margaret, I think it's time we had a serious discussion about boundaries." "I agree completely. When can we meet?" I tried to keep my voice calm and reasonable. "I don't think an in-person meeting is necessary. I can explain everything over the phone." Jessica's tone was businesslike, as if she were negotiating a contract rather than discussing family relationships. "Tommy has been showing signs of anxiety and confusion lately. His teacher has noticed it, his pediatrician has commented on it, and David and I believe it's directly related to the inconsistency in his routine." "What inconsistency?" "I follow whatever rules you set. I call ahead. I don't bring unauthorized treats. I limit my visits to what you approve." My frustration was building despite my efforts to stay calm. "The inconsistency isn't in your behavior, Margaret. It's in your presence. Tommy gets excited about seeing you, then he's disappointed when the visits end. He asks questions about why things have changed, why he doesn't see you as often, why there are so many rules now. These conversations upset him and disrupt the stability we're trying to create." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So your solution is to eliminate me from his life entirely?" "Not eliminate. Just significantly reduce contact until Tommy is older and better able to handle complex family dynamics." Jessica paused, and when she continued, her voice had a note of false sympathy. "Margaret, I know this is hard for you, But you have to understand that David and I are Tommy's parents now. We have to make decisions based on what's best for him, not what feels good for the adults in his life. Jessica, I am not an adult in his life. I am his grandmother. I helped raise him. I was there when he took his first steps, said his first words, had his first day of school. You cannot just erase that relationship because it doesn't fit into your perfect family plan. I'm not erasing anything, Margaret. I'm managing it. And if you can't accept that, then maybe we need to consider a complete break until you can approach this situation more rationally. The conversation ended with Jessica hanging up on me. I immediately tried calling David's cell phone, but it went to voicemail. I tried texting him, asking him to call me urgently about Tommy. Hours passed with no response. Finally, late that evening, I received a text. Mom, Jessica explained what happened today. We need some space to figure this out as a family. Please don't contact us for a while. Space. The word felt like a knife. After 5 years of being an integral part of Tommy's daily life, I was suddenly persona non grata in my own family. I spent that night lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. How had Jessica managed to convince David that his own mother was somehow harmful to his son? The next few weeks were torture. I drove by their house sometimes, hoping to catch a glimpse of Tommy playing in the yard or leaving for school. I saw him a few times, but he looked smaller somehow, less vibrant than the energetic boy I remembered. I wanted desperately to call out to him, but I knew it would only make things worse. I tried reaching out to other family members, hoping someone could mediate or provide perspective. My sister Helen was sympathetic but lived too far away to be of practical help. David's father, my ex-husband Robert, listened patiently, but pointed out that legally, David and Jessica had every right to control access to their child. Margaret, I understand your frustration, but if David is supporting Jessica's decisions, there's not much anyone else can do. Halloween came and went without me seeing Tommy in his costume. Thanksgiving approached, and for the first time in 30 years, I wouldn't be hosting dinner for my son and grandson. Jessica had made it clear that they would be spending the holiday with her family in Phoenix, and I was not invited to find an alternative arrangement. I tried one last time to reach David directly, calling his office during what I knew were his usual work hours. His assistant put me through immediately, catching him off guard. Mom, is everything okay? Is there an emergency? David, my grandson not knowing that his grandmother loves him is an emergency. I had rehearsed this conversation dozens of times, but now that I had him on the phone, everything I'd planned to say jumbled together. I understand that Jessica has concerns, but completely cutting me out of Tommy's life isn't the answer. Mom, nobody's cutting you out. We just need some time to establish better boundaries and routines. Maybe after the holidays, when things settle down, we can figure out a visitation schedule that works for everyone. Visitation schedule. The clinical language made our family relationship sound like a custody arrangement. David, listen to yourself. You're talking about scheduling visits with your own mother like I'm a divorced parent fighting for weekend custody. This is insane. Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Jessica is Tommy's mother now, and she's trying to create a stable environment for him. If you could just work with her instead of fighting her on everything, this could all be so much easier. I have worked with her. I've followed every rule, jumped through every hoop, swallowed every criticism. But nothing I do is ever enough, because the real goal isn't better boundaries. The real goal is getting rid of me entirely. There was a long silence, and when David spoke again, his voice was tired. Mom, I have to go. I have a meeting in 5 minutes. We'll talk about this after the holidays, okay? The line went dead, leaving me holding the phone and feeling more alone than I had since my husband died 8 years earlier, after the holidays. Everything was always going to be resolved after something. After Tommy adjusted. After the new routines were established. After Jessica felt more secure. After the holidays. I was beginning to understand that after meant never. December arrived with an early snowfall, blanketing the city in pristine white. In previous years, this would have been magical. Tommy and I would have built snowmen in my backyard, made hot chocolate with extra marshmallows, and planned elaborate sledding adventures. This year, I watched the snowfall from my living room window and felt nothing but emptiness. Christmas shopping was a special kind of torture. I wandered through toy stores, seeing things Tommy would love, but having no way to give them to him. I bought presents anyway, wrapping them carefully and storing them in my closet, with the hope that someday, somehow, I'd be able to watch him open them. 2 weeks before Christmas, I received an unexpected phone call from Tommy's school. "Mrs. Chen? This is Sarah Martinez, Tommy's teacher. I'm calling because I'm a bit concerned about some changes I've noticed in Tommy's behavior lately." My heart raced. "What kind of changes?" "Well, he's become much quieter in class, less participatory. He used to be one of our most enthusiastic students, always eager to share stories about his family and his activities. But lately, he seems withdrawn. He's also been asking some questions that concern me." "What kind of questions?" Ms. Martinez hesitated. "Questions about whether it's normal for families to have rules about who children can talk to, whether it's okay for parents to read children's private messages or monitor their conversations. Questions about what happens to grandparents when families reorganize." The language he uses is quite sophisticated for an 8-year-old, like he's repeating conversations he's overheard. I felt sick. "Ms. Martinez, has anyone from the school spoken to Tommy's parents about these concerns?" "I've left several messages for Mrs. Pierce, but she hasn't returned my calls." "I was hoping you might have some insight, since Tommy used to talk about you quite frequently. He hasn't mentioned you at all lately, which is another thing that concerns me." I explained the situation as diplomatically as possible, focusing on the family tensions rather than my specific issues with Jessica. Ms. Martinez listened sympathetically and promised to continue monitoring Tommy's well-being at school. She also mentioned that the school counselor was available if Tommy needed someone to talk to, which both comforted and terrified me. The idea that my grandson might need professional counseling because of family dysfunction was heartbreaking. After hanging up with Ms. Martinez, I made a decision that I knew was risky but felt necessary. I wrote Tommy a letter. Not a long, emotional plea, but a simple note telling him how much I loved him and missed him. I enclosed a small photo of the two of us from last summer, taken during our last normal day together before everything changed. I addressed the envelope to Tommy specifically and mailed it to their house. 3 days later, the letter was returned to me unopened with "Return to sender refused," written in Jessica's unmistakable handwriting across the front. The sight of that envelope, with my grandson's name crossed out in red ink, broke something inside me. I sat at my kitchen table and cried harder than I had since my husband's funeral. That's when I realized I needed help, professional help. I made an appointment with a family therapist who specialized in grandparent alienation, a phenomenon I'd never heard of but apparently experienced by thousands of older adults across the country. Dr. Patricia Walsh listened to my story with compassion and expertise, helping me understand that I was not alone and not crazy. "Margaret, what you're describing is a form of parental alienation that specifically targets grandparents," Dr. Walsh explained during our first session. "It often happens when a new partner enters a family system and feels threatened by existing relationships. The alienating parent gradually isolates the child from the targeted grandparent, using the child's well-being as justification for increasingly restrictive boundaries." But why would Jessica feel threatened by me? I've tried so hard to be supportive and accommodating. That's exactly why you're a threat. You have a long-standing, loving relationship with Tommy that predates Jessica's presence in the family. You represent a connection to his past, to his identity, that she can't control or replicate. By eliminating your influence, she can reshape Tommy's sense of family to match her vision. Dr. Walsh helped me understand that Jessica's behavior followed a predictable pattern. First, small criticisms and boundary adjustments that seem reasonable. Then, escalating restrictions that are justified as being in the child's best interest. Finally, complete alienation presented as necessary for family stability. The most insidious part was how the alienating parent convinced the other parent to participate in the process. "David genuinely believes he's protecting Tommy," Dr. Walsh explained. "Jessica has likely convinced him that your presence is causing Tommy distress, that consistency requires your absence, and that being a good father means supporting his wife's parenting decisions. He's not intentionally hurting you or Tommy. He's trying to keep his new marriage stable, while doing what he's been told is best for his son." This perspective helped me feel less angry at David and more strategic about finding a solution. Dr. Walsh recommended documenting everything, maintaining a record of my attempts to contact Tommy and the responses I received. She also suggested that I needed to be patient and look for opportunities to demonstrate to David that Jessica's version of events didn't match reality. The truth has a way of emerging, Dr. Walsh said. Children are remarkably perceptive, and Tommy is old enough to understand that something isn't right about his current situation. Eventually, the contradictions between what he's told and what he experiences will become too obvious to ignore. As if Dr. Walsh were prophetic, that opportunity came sooner than expected, in the most heartbreaking way possible. It was a cold Tuesday morning in mid-January when my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, thinking it might be a telemarketer, but something made me pick up. "Hello? Grandma Maggie?" The voice was small, whispered, and unmistakably Tommy's. My heart stopped. "Tommy, sweetheart, is that you? Where are you calling from?" "I'm at school. I used the office phone. Mrs. Martinez said I could call you if it was important, and it's really, really important." He was crying, trying to keep his voice down so he wouldn't be overheard. "What's wrong, honey? Are you hurt?" "Grandma Maggie, something happened at home last night, and I recorded it on my tablet. I need to show someone, but I don't know who to tell." The fear in his 8-year-old voice made my blood run cold. "Tommy, what kind of thing happened?" "Mommy, Jessica, and Daddy had a big fight about you. She said things. She said really mean things about you that aren't true. And she said things about me too. About why she doesn't want you around." His voice broke completely. "Grandma Maggie, I think she doesn't want me to love you anymore." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of months of manipulation and isolation finally coming to light through the innocent words of a confused child. "Tommy, where is your tablet now?" "Hidden in my backpack. Mrs. Martinez said you could come pick me up early today because I'm really upset. Can you come get me? I want to show you what I recorded." "I'll be there in 15 minutes, sweetheart. Stay with Mrs. Martinez, okay?" I was already grabbing my keys and coat, my hands shaking with a mixture of rage and desperate hope. As I drove to Tommy's school, my mind raced with possibilities. What had Jessica said that was so upsetting that Tommy felt compelled to record it? What had he witnessed that made him reach out to me, despite months of being discouraged from contact? And, most importantly, what was I going to do with whatever evidence he'd captured? I arrived at Lincoln Elementary School and was met by Ms. Martinez, who looked genuinely concerned. "Mrs. Chen, thank you for coming so quickly. Tommy has been very distressed this morning. He asked to call you specifically, and given our previous conversation about his behavioral changes, I felt it was appropriate to honor that request." Tommy appeared from the counselor's office, his face red from crying, his small backpack clutched tightly in his hands. When he saw me, he ran straight into my arms, hugging me with a desperation that broke my heart. "Grandma Maggie, I missed you so much. I didn't understand why you stopped coming to see me." "I never stopped wanting to see you, sweetheart. Never. There were just some grown-up problems that kept us apart, but I never stopped loving you. Not for one single day." We found a quiet corner of the school library where Tommy could show me what he'd recorded. With shaking hands, he pulled his tablet from his backpack and opened a video file dated the previous evening. I was supposed to be sleeping, but they were yelling, so I started recording from the top of the stairs. What I saw and heard in that 10-minute video would haunt me forever, but it would also be the key to getting my grandson back. The video began with the sound of raised voices echoing up the staircase. Tommy had positioned his tablet at the top of the stairs, angled down toward the living room where David and Jessica were having what appeared to be a heated discussion. The audio was crystal clear, and what I heard made my stomach turn. "I don't understand why you keep defending her, David." Jessica's voice was sharp, cutting through the evening air like a blade. "Your mother is manipulative and controlling, and she's undermining everything I'm trying to build with Tommy." "Mom isn't manipulative, Jess. She's just used to being involved in Tommy's life. She helped raise him when Rebecca left." David sounded tired, like this was an argument they'd had many times before. That's exactly the problem. She thinks she's his real mother, and I'm just some interloper. Well, I have news for her. I'm the one who's here every day. I'm the one who packs his lunches, helps with homework, and deals with his tantrums. She gets to be the fun grandmother who shows up with presents and sugar, and I have to be the responsible adult. I watched Tommy's small face on the screen, his eyes wide with confusion, as he listened to Jessica tear apart our relationship with clinical precision. Even through the grainy tablet video, I could see how her words were affecting him. Jessica, that's not fair. Mom has always been supportive of you. She follows all the rules you set. She calls ahead before visiting. She's tried to work with your parenting style. David's defense of me was weak, but it was something. Work with my parenting style. David, she doesn't respect my authority at all. Every time she comes over, Tommy gets excited and starts asking why things have to be different now. Why there are so many rules. Why he can't just go to Grandma Maggie's house whenever he wants like he used to. Do you know how that makes me feel? Maybe because the rules are excessive, Jess. She's his grandmother, not some stranger we need to supervise. The sound of footsteps pacing across the hardwood floor came through clearly, and Jessica's voice grew more agitated. She fills his head with ideas about how things used to be, makes him nostalgic for a time before I was part of this family. Every visit is a reminder that I'm not his real mother, that I'm just the woman who married his father. That's your insecurity talking, not reality. There was a sharp intake of breath, and when Jessica spoke again, her voice was dangerously quiet. My insecurity? David, I've given everything to this family. I've put my career on hold to focus on being a mother to a child who isn't even mine biologically. I've opened my home, my heart, my life to Tommy, and all I get in return is constant comparison to St. Margaret, who can do no wrong. Nobody's comparing you to Mom. Tommy is. Every single day. Grandma Maggie makes better cookies. Grandma Maggie tells better stories. Grandma Maggie doesn't make me eat vegetables before dessert. Grandma Maggie this, Grandma Maggie that. Do you have any idea what that does to someone who's trying to parent a child? I could see Tommy on the video wiping tears from his eyes, and my heart broke for him. He was listening to the woman he'd been taught to call mother express resentment for his love for me, turning his natural affection into a weapon against both of us. Jess, he loves you too. He just has room in his heart for both of you. No, David, children can't handle divided loyalties. It confuses them, makes them anxious, prevents them from fully bonding with their primary caregivers. I've read extensively about this. Blended families require clear hierarchies and boundaries, or they don't work. The clinical language Jessica used to describe Tommy's emotional needs made my skin crawl. She was talking about an 8-year-old boy like he was a case study rather than a beloved child with complex feelings and relationships. What are you saying, Jess? I'm saying that Margaret needs to step back completely until Tommy is old enough to handle complex family relationships. I'm talking about no contact for at least 2 years, maybe longer, just until he's fully bonded with me as his primary maternal figure. The silence that followed was deafening. Even David seemed shocked by the extremity of what Jessica was proposing. You want me to cut my mother out of Tommy's life for 2 years? I want you to prioritize your wife and son's well-being over your mother's feelings. Is that really so unreasonable? Jess, that would destroy Mom. Tommy is everything to her. After Dad died, after we lost Sarah, Tommy became her whole world. You're asking me to take that away from her. I'm asking you to choose, David, your mother or your family, because I won't continue to compete with her for Tommy's affection, and I won't raise a child in a household where my authority is constantly questioned and undermined. The ultimatum hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Through the tablet screen, I could see Tommy's face crumpling as he processed what Jessica was really saying. She was forcing David to choose between his wife and his mother, using Tommy as leverage to get her way. That's not a choice I should have to make, David said finally. But it's the choice you do have to make. Margaret has made it clear that she won't respect the boundaries I need to create a stable home for Tommy. So either she goes, or I do. And if I go, David, Tommy comes with me. The threat was delivered with chilling calm, but its implications were devastating. Jessica was essentially threatening to leave David and take Tommy with her if she didn't get complete control over his relationship with me. It was emotional blackmail of the worst kind. You would really take Tommy away from me over this? I would protect Tommy from a toxic family dynamic that's preventing him from developing healthy attachments. If you can't see that Margaret's behavior is harmful to our family, then maybe you're not the partner I thought you were. David's voice was strained when he responded. What exactly do you want me to do? I want you to call your mother and tell her that contact with Tommy needs to cease immediately. No visits, no phone calls, no letters, no attempts to see him at school or activities. Complete separation until further notice. And if I don't, then Tommy and I will spend some time at my parents' house while you figure out what kind of family you want to have. My father has already offered me a position with his consulting firm, and Phoenix has excellent schools. It would be a fresh start for Tommy, away from all the confusion and conflict. I watched my son's face crumple as he realized the impossible position Jessica had put him in. She had systematically maneuvered him into a corner where any choice he made would result in devastating loss. Either he lost his mother and subjected me to unimaginable pain, or he lost his wife and potentially his son. How did we get here, Jess? When we got married, you said you wanted to be part of our family. You said you understood how important Mom was to Tommy. I was naive then. I thought I could share Tommy's affection and still be an effective parent. But children need clarity, David. They need to know who their primary caregivers are, who sets the rules, who makes the decisions. Margaret's presence prevents that clarity. So your solution is to erase her from his life entirely? My solution is to prioritize Tommy's psychological development over Margaret's emotional needs. Sometimes love means making hard choices, even when they hurt. The irony of Jessica using the language of love to justify her cruelty was not lost on me. She had wrapped her manipulation in the rhetoric of child psychology and maternal concern, making it almost impossible for David to argue against her without seeming like a bad father. I need time to think about this, David said. You have until tomorrow morning. I've already looked into flights to Phoenix, and I've spoken to a lawyer about temporary custody arrangements. I'm not bluffing, David. This ends now, one way or another. The video ended abruptly as Jessica's footsteps approached the staircase, and Tommy had clearly scrambled back to his room to avoid being caught. I sat in the school library, staring at the blank screen, my hands trembling with rage and heartbreak. Tommy was watching my face intently, trying to gauge my reaction. Grandma Maggie, is Mommy Jessica going to take me away from Daddy? I pulled him closer, choosing my words carefully. Sweetheart, what Mommy Jessica said was very hurtful and wrong. She's confused about some things, and she's making Daddy choose between people he loves when he shouldn't have to. Why doesn't she want me to see you anymore? Did I do something wrong? The innocence of the question broke my heart. Tommy, you didn't do anything wrong, not one single thing. This is about grown-up problems that have nothing to do with you being a good or bad boy. But I love both of you. Why can't I love both of you? You can love both of us, sweetheart. Love isn't something that runs out when you share it with more people. If anything, the more love you have in your life, the happier and stronger you become. Tommy nodded, but I could see the confusion in his 8-year-old eyes. He was trying to process adult concepts that were far beyond his developmental capacity, wrestling with emotional dynamics that even adults found challenging. Grandma Maggie, what are we gonna do? I don't want to move to Phoenix. I don't want to leave Daddy, but I don't want to never see you again either. I hugged him tighter, my mind racing with possibilities. The video he'd recorded was damning evidence of Jessica's manipulation and threats, but using it would require careful strategy. I needed to protect Tommy from further trauma while exposing Jessica's behavior to David in a way that couldn't be dismissed or rationalized. Tommy, I need to ask you something very important. Are you okay with me showing this video to other people? To Daddy and maybe to some other grown-ups who can help us? He nodded solemnly. I made the video because I wanted someone to know what really happened. Mrs. Martinez says that sometimes grown-ups need to see proof of things before they understand. The wisdom of his teacher's words struck me deeply. Jessica had been so careful to present herself as the reasonable, caring stepmother, while painting me as the problematic, intrusive grandmother. But Tommy's video revealed the truth behind her carefully constructed facade. I made a decision that would change everything. Tommy, I'm going to need to take you home now, and I'm going to show this video to your daddy. Are you ready for that? Will you stay with me? I'm scared about what Mommy Jessica might do when she finds out I recorded her. The fact that an 8-year-old was afraid of his stepmother's reaction to being exposed was perhaps the most damning evidence of all. I'll stay with you as long as you need me to, sweetheart. I promise. We left the school together, Tommy's small hand gripped tightly in mine as we walked to my car. During the drive to his house, he chattered nervously about school, his friends, his upcoming science project, anything to distract himself from the confrontation that was about to unfold. I let him talk, understanding that he needed to process his anxiety in whatever way felt comfortable. When we pulled into the driveway, I could see David's car in the garage, which meant he was home early from work. Jessica's car was also there, a sleek silver sedan that seemed to embody her need for perfection and control. I took a deep breath, knowing that the next hour would determine the future of our family. Tommy and I walked to the front door together, and I rang the bell. Jessica answered, her face immediately darkening when she saw me standing there with Tommy. Margaret, what are you doing here? Tommy, why aren't you at school? Mrs. Martinez called me to pick up Tommy because he was upset about something that happened at home last night. I said calmly, we need to talk to David. You have no right to pick up my son from school without permission. You're not on his emergency contact list anymore. Jessica's voice was tight with anger, but there was also a note of panic that suggested she suspected why I was there. I have something David needs to see, I said, holding up Tommy's tablet. Something that involves all of us. Jessica's eyes fixed on the tablet, and I saw the exact moment she realized what it might contain. Her face went pale, then flushed red with anger. Tommy, go to your room, now. Actually, Tommy should stay, I said firmly. This concerns him too, and he's brave enough to be part of the solution. David appeared behind Jessica, looking confused and harried. Mom, what's going on? Why is Tommy home from school? David, I need to show you something. Tommy recorded a conversation you and Jessica had last night, and I think you need to see it. The blood drained from David's face as he looked from me to Jessica to Tommy. What kind of conversation? Jessica stepped forward aggressively. David, don't let her manipulate you with some edited video. This is exactly the kind of dramatic, interfering behavior I was talking about. Nobody edited anything, Tommy said quietly, speaking up for himself for the first time in months. I just recorded what I heard because it scared me. David knelt down to Tommy's level. What scared you, buddy? Mommy Jessica said she was going to take me away from you if Grandma Maggie didn't go away forever. She said I can't love both of you because it makes me confused. Tommy's voice was steady, but tears were streaming down his face. David stood slowly, his expression hardening as he looked at Jessica. Is that what you said? David, it's more complicated than that. We were having a private discussion about boundaries, and Tommy wasn't supposed to be listening. Jessica was trying to regain control of the narrative, but the panic in her voice was unmistakable. Show me the video, David said to me. We moved into the living room, the same room where the conversation had taken place the night before. I set up the tablet on the coffee table and pressed play. For the next 10 minutes, we all listened to Jessica's ultimatum, her threats to take Tommy to Phoenix, her demand that I be completely eliminated from Tommy's life. David's face grew paler with each passing minute when Jessica's voice came through the speakers talking about Tommy's inability to handle divided loyalties, about her need to be his primary maternal figure, about the necessity of cutting me out for years. David closed his eyes as if he were in physical pain. When the video ended, the room was silent except for the sound of Tommy sniffling beside me. Jessica was the first to speak, her voice defensive and desperate. David, you're taking that completely out of context. I was upset, I said things I didn't mean. The important thing is that we need to find a solution that works for our family. What context makes threatening to take my son away from me acceptable? David's voice was quiet but filled with barely controlled fury. I wasn't threatening anything. I was trying to make you understand how serious this situation has become. Margaret's interference is affecting Tommy's ability to bond with me, and that's not healthy for any of us. David turned to Tommy, who was sitting beside me on the couch, still holding my hand. Tommy, do you feel confused about loving Grandma Maggie and Mommy Jessica? Tommy shook his head firmly. No, Daddy, I love lots of people. I love you and Grandma Maggie and Mommy Jessica and my teacher and Uncle Robert and Great Aunt Helen. Love doesn't make me confused. Rules about love make me confused. The simplicity and clarity of Tommy's response cut through all of Jessica's psychological theories and expert opinions. An 8-year-old had just articulated what the adults had been struggling to understand for months. David stood and walked to the window, staring out at the yard where Tommy's swing set sat unused in the winter snow. When he turned back to face us, his expression was resolved. Jessica, I need you to explain to me how threatening to take my son away from me was in anyone's best interest. David, please. I was emotional, I said things wrong. But the underlying issue remains. Your mother's involvement in Tommy's life is creating problems that we need to address. The only problem I see is that you've been systematically alienating Tommy from his grandmother for months, and when that didn't work fast enough, you decided to force me to choose between my wife and my mother. David's voice was getting stronger, more confident with each word. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened. And worse than that, you were willing to use Tommy as a weapon to get what you wanted. You were prepared to take him away from me, away from his school, his friends, his entire life, just to prove a point. Jessica's carefully constructed facade was finally crumbling. David, you don't understand the pressure I've been under. Trying to be a mother to a child who clearly prefers his grandmother, trying to establish authority in a household where I'm constantly undermined, trying to build a family with a man who won't support me. I've supported you in everything, Jess. I followed your rules about visits, I limited Mom's contact with Tommy, I tried to make you feel secure and respected. But it was never enough, was it? Because the real goal wasn't better boundaries. The real goal was total control. Tommy spoke up from the couch, his voice small but clear. Daddy, I don't prefer Grandma Maggie over Mommy Jessica. I just love them differently. Like how I love you differently than I love my friends, but I still love everyone. The wisdom and emotional intelligence of this 8-year-old boy was extraordinary. Despite months of manipulation and pressure, he had maintained his capacity for love and his understanding that relationships didn't have to be competitive. Jessica made one last desperate attempt to regain control. David, if you side with your mother on this, if you don't support the boundaries I need to be an effective parent, then I don't see how our marriage can work. David was quiet for a long moment, and I held my breath waiting for his response. Finally, he spoke with a calm certainty that surprised everyone in the room. Jessica, I love you. I wanted our marriage to work, and I wanted you to be happy in our family. But I will not sacrifice my son's relationship with his grandmother to appease your insecurities. I will not allow you to use threats and ultimatums to control who Tommy is allowed to love. And I will absolutely not tolerate you using Tommy as a pawn in whatever game you think you're playing. So that's it? You're choosing your mother over your wife? I'm choosing my son's well-being over your need to control everyone around you. If you can't accept that Tommy has room in his heart for both his grandmother and his stepmother, then maybe you're right that this marriage can't work. The finality in David's voice seemed to shock Jessica into silence. For months, she had been confident that she could force him to choose, secure in the belief that he would ultimately prioritize his marriage over his relationship with me. She had miscalculated badly. Tommy got up from the couch and walked over to David, taking his hand. Daddy, does this mean Grandma Maggie can come to my soccer games again? David smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. Yes, buddy. Grandma Maggie can come to your soccer games, and we can have Sunday dinners again, and you can bake cookies together, and do all the things you used to do. What about Mommy Jessica? Tommy asked, with the concern of a child who didn't want anyone to be hurt, even someone who had hurt him. David looked at Jessica, who was standing by the fireplace with tears streaming down her face. That's up to Mommy Jessica. She needs to decide if she wants to be part of a family where people are allowed to love each other freely, or if she needs something different. Jessica wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. her professional composure reasserting itself even in the face of personal defeat. I need some time to think. I'm going to stay at my sister's house for a few days while I figure out what I want to do. I think that's a good idea, David said gently. Take all the time you need. As Jessica gathered her things and prepared to leave, Tommy surprised everyone by approaching her. Mommy Jessica, I'm sorry you're sad. I really do love you too, even if it doesn't seem like it sometimes. Jessica knelt down and hugged Tommy, and for a moment, I saw a glimpse of genuine emotion beneath her controlled exterior. I love you too, Tommy. I just got confused about how to show it properly. After Jessica left, the three of us sat in the living room that had been the scene of so much conflict, finally able to breathe freely. David pulled Tommy onto his lap and looked at me with eyes full of regret and gratitude. Mom, I am so sorry. I let this go on way too long. I should have stood up to Jessica months ago, but I was so afraid of failing at another marriage that I lost sight of what was really important. David, you were in an impossible situation. Jessica is very skilled at manipulation, and she used your love for Tommy against you. The important thing is that we're all together now. But I put you through months of hell. I let you think that I didn't value your relationship with Tommy, that I was willing to just cut you out of our lives. David's voice was thick with emotion. You were trying to keep your family together. I understand that, even if I hated the result. Tommy looked up at his father with serious 8-year-old eyes. Daddy, are you and Mommy Jessica gonna get divorced like you and Mommy Rebecca? David considered the question carefully before answering. I don't know, buddy. We have some big problems to work through, and it's going to take time to figure out if we can solve them together. Will I still get to live with you? You will always live with me, Tommy. No matter what happens with Mommy Jessica, you and I and Grandma Maggie are family, and nothing will ever change that. The relief on Tommy's face was visible. For months, he had been living with the uncertainty of his place in the family, wondering if his love for me was somehow wrong, or if Jessica's threats to take him away might actually come to pass. Now finally, he had the security he needed to just be a kid again. Over the next few weeks, our family slowly began to heal. Jessica remained at her sister's house, communicating with David primarily through text messages about practical matters like her belongings and their shared financial responsibilities. She never asked to see Tommy, which broke my heart for him, but also confirmed that her attachment to him had been more about control than genuine maternal feeling. Tommy and I resumed our regular activities with joy and relief that felt almost surreal after months of separation. We baked cookies, visited museums, had impromptu adventures that reminded both of us why our relationship was so precious. The difference now was that Tommy no longer felt guilty about enjoying time with me, no longer worried that his happiness would somehow be used against him later. David started therapy to process the emotional manipulation he had endured and to develop better boundaries for future relationships. He also spent time rebuilding his relationship with Tommy, who had been caught in the middle of adult conflicts for far too long. Father and son began having weekly one-on-one time, just the two of them, to strengthen their bond without the complication of other family dynamics. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly amicable. Jessica seemed to recognize that fighting for custody of a child she had never truly bonded with would be both futile and expensive. She accepted a financial settlement that allowed her to start fresh in Phoenix, where she eventually took the job with her father's consulting firm. Tommy handled the transition better than any of us expected. While he was sad that Jessica was leaving, he wasn't devastated in the way children typically are when they lose a parental figure. Her emotional absence over the previous months had already prepared him for her physical absence. He sent her a card on her birthday and occasionally asked David if she was doing well, but he didn't seem to miss her in any profound way. 6 months later, our family had found a new rhythm that felt sustainable and healthy. David was dating again, but slowly and carefully, with Tommy's well-being as the primary consideration. He had learned to recognize the warning signs of controlling behavior and was committed to never again allowing anyone to threaten Tommy's existing relationships. Tommy thrived in the new environment of unconditional love and support. His teacher, Ms. Martinez, reported that he had returned to his old enthusiastic, participatory self at school. His anxiety had disappeared, replaced by the confident curiosity that had always been his hallmark. He made new friends, excelled in his studies, and seemed to take genuine joy in the simple pleasures of childhood. As for me, I felt like I had been given a second chance at life. The months of alienation and uncertainty had been among the darkest of my life, but they had also taught me valuable lessons about resilience, the power of truth, and the unbreakable bonds of genuine love. Tommy and I were closer than ever, united by the shared experience of almost losing each other. One evening, as Tommy and I sat at my kitchen table working on a jigsaw puzzle, he looked up at me with those serious brown eyes that always seemed to see more than an 8-year-old should. "Grandma Maggie, do you think Mommy Jessica was just scared?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "I've been thinking about why she said those things about you, and I think maybe she was scared that if I loved you too much, I wouldn't love her enough. But that's not how love works, is it?" I marveled at his insight. "No, honey, that's not how love works. Love grows when you share it, it doesn't shrink." "But you're right that Mommy Jessica was scared. Sometimes when people are scared, they make choices that hurt other people, even when they don't mean to." "I hope she figures out how to not be scared anymore," Tommy said, returning his attention to the puzzle, "because being scared all the time must be really exhausting." His compassion for someone who had caused him so much confusion and pain was extraordinary. Despite everything he had experienced, Tommy had emerged from the ordeal with his capacity for empathy and tact. If anything, the experience had deepened his emotional intelligence and his understanding of human complexity. As we worked on the puzzle together, I reflected on the journey our family had taken. Jessica's attempt to control Tommy's love had ultimately backfired, revealing the strength of authentic relationships built on trust, respect, and genuine caring. Tommy's decision to record that conversation and share it with me had been the act of a child who understood, on some instinctive level, that truth and transparency were necessary for healing. The pieces of the jigsaw puzzle slowly came together under our patient efforts, forming a picture of a lighthouse standing strong against stormy seas. It seemed like an appropriate metaphor for what we had all been through. The storm of Jessica's manipulation and threats had tested every relationship in our family, but the lighthouse of genuine love had guided us safely through to calmer waters. "Grandma Maggie," Tommy said as we placed the final piece, "I'm glad I made those videos." "Why is that, sweetheart?" "Because sometimes grown-ups need to see the truth before they can fix things that are broken." His words echoed what his teacher had told him, but they carried the weight of lived experience. Tommy had learned, at 8 years old, that truth-telling requires courage, but that courage is rewarded when it leads to justice and healing. "You were very brave, Tommy. Not every child would have known to do what you did, or been strong enough to follow through with it." He smiled, the same radiant smile that had captivated me from the moment he was born. "I had to be brave, Grandma Maggie, because losing you would have been the worst thing ever." As we put away the completed puzzle and prepared for his bedtime routine, I thought about how much we had all learned from this painful experience. David had learned to trust his instincts about people and to prioritize authentic relationships over the appearance of family harmony. Tommy had learned that love is not a zero-sum game, and that truth, however difficult, is always preferable to manipulation. And I had learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is fighting for relationships that matter, even when the fight seems impossible to win. Jessica's parting words to David had been about choosing his mother over his wife, as if love were a competition with winners and losers. But the real choice had been between control and freedom, between manipulation and authenticity, between fear-based restrictions and love-based connections. When framed that way, the decision became obvious. Later that evening, after Tommy was asleep and David had gone home to his own house, I sat in my living room looking at photos from our reunion. The joy on Tommy's face in those pictures was radiant and unguarded, the expression of a child who no longer had to worry about whether his love was appropriate or allowed. The relief on David's face was equally profound, the look of a man who had rediscovered his own moral compass after months of confusion. My phone rang, interrupting my reflection. The caller ID showed an unknown number, but something prompted me to answer. "Mrs. Chen?" This is Carol Williams. I don't know if you remember me, but I called you several months ago about a similar situation with my daughter. I was confused for a moment, then realized she had the wrong person. I'm sorry, but I think you may have dialed the wrong number. I don't know anyone named Carol Williams. Oh, I'm so sorry. I was trying to reach Margaret Sterling about her granddaughter's wedding situation. I must have gotten numbers mixed up in my contacts. As she apologized and prepared to hang up, I felt a strange sense of connection to this unknown woman who was dealing with her own family crisis. Wait, Carol. I know you don't know me, but I just went through something similar with my own family. If you ever need someone to talk to who understands what it's like when someone tries to separate you from your grandchildren, please don't hesitate to call. There was a pause, and when Carol spoke again, her voice was warm with gratitude. Thank you, Margaret. That means more than you know. Sometimes it helps to know that other people have faced similar challenges and come through them. After we hung up, I thought about the strange coincidence of that wrong number. Perhaps there were more families dealing with these issues than I had realized. Perhaps the combination of blended families, insecure step-parents, and vulnerable children created situations that were more common than anyone wanted to admit. If that were true, then Tommy's courage in recording that conversation and standing up for truth might serve as inspiration for other children caught in similar circumstances. His story was proof that love ultimately triumphs over manipulation, that authenticity is stronger than control, and that children possess an innate wisdom about relationships that adults sometimes lose in their complicated emotional maneuvering. As I turned off the lights and headed upstairs to bed, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the family that surrounded me. Not the perfect family that Jessica had tried to create through rules and restrictions, but the real family that Tommy, David, and I had built through years of shared experiences, mutual support, and unconditional love. The house was quiet now, but it was the peaceful quiet of resolution, rather than the tense quiet of conflict. Tomorrow would bring new adventures with Tommy, new opportunities to strengthen our bond, and new reminders that the simplest relationships are often the most powerful. In his bedroom across town, Tommy was probably sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, no longer worried that his love for his grandmother was somehow wrong or dangerous. That peace of mind, that freedom to love without fear, was worth every moment of the struggle we had endured to protect it. And in Phoenix, Jessica was probably building a new life, hopefully one where she could learn to love without controlling, to parent without manipulating, and to find security in authentic connection rather than manufactured compliance. I genuinely hoped she would find the happiness that had eluded her in our family, and that she would never again try to solve her insecurities by limiting a child's capacity for love. The storm had passed, the lighthouse had held firm, and our family had emerged stronger than before. Sometimes the greatest victories are simply the restoration of what should never have been threatened in the first place: the right to love freely, the power of truth, and the unbreakable bonds between generations. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.